Welcome to another Saturday night show. In today's show, we talk about the world-renowned traveler whose travels make most of ours pale in comparison. He has ziplined over jungles in Costa Rica, parlayed with snake charmers in Morocco, entered the pyramids at Giza, consulted the Oracle of Delphi, anteed up in Monte Carlo, and visited Dracula's castle on Halloween night. We are, of course, talking about Brian David Bruns. We will also have another Show Us Your Face segment, and our next cruise is coming even closer. This is Cruise Week TV Live. Welcome to Cruise Week TV Live. I'm Matt, and we have another jam-packed show for you. As a first-time cruiser, I talk to the experts in travel and cruising and to find out as much as I can and learn the do's and don'ts of travel. We share these with you and let you ask questions to our weekly guests so that we can all become experts together. In a moment, we'll be talking with Brian, so get your questions ready. But first, I want to tell you about something I've been using and it's made my life so much easier. It's called Uber Eats. You're probably familiar with Uber, right? The car ride service that's faster and cheaper than a taxi. Well, they also deliver food from any of your favorite restaurants for a flat fee of $4.99. If you're at work or on a lunch break and don't want to take the usual fast food, you can order ahead of time for a lunch delivery. All you need to do is use the Uber Eats app. Find the restaurant you want to eat from, the entire menu comes up, then you click the items you want, and that's it. It's paid through the Uber app automatically. You can even see when the food is on its way through the app and exactly where the delivery driver is. To get you started, I want to give you $15 of free food with the code featured below. This is also helps our sponsors know that it's working well, so please have a meal delivered using our code. This also helps support our show. Try Uber Eats today. Without further ado, let's bring our interviewee Brian on for a wonderful chat. Hey Brian, how's it going?
Hello, thanks for having me.
No problem, great to have you. So tell us about yourself before we get started with all the questions.
Sure. Well, my name is Brian David Bruns. I'm an author and a traveler, author first, but I used to work on cruise ships. That's what started it all. And it was about 10 years ago my first book came out, which was Cruise Confidential, which was all about my experiences being a waiter on Carnival Cruise Lines. At the time, I was the first and only, at the time, American to survive an entire contract without quitting. So that was somewhat noteworthy. So when I finally did leave the ships after about 4 years and 6 different cruise lines, I think, I finally came home and wrote about it. Since then, I've been traveling.
So you bring up a point about a lot of Americans can't finish contracts on cruise ships. Why would you say that is? What's the difficulty or the hurdles that you have to overcome?
Cruise ships they're sweatshops. Call it what it is. I loved my experience working on a cruise ship, but there was a reason why they did not have any agencies targeting Americans, because you don't get much money, you work a lot of hours, you live in a cabin that's the size of a closet with foreigners you don't know that rotate on a weekly basis. The little things like that, Americans don't want to deal with, and certainly we don't want to deal with it if we could make more money at McDonald's. So they don't really want to cater to American cruise or American employees. That's why you're going to see everybody from second world nations and third world nations. It sounds bad when you talk about it that way, but that's really just scratching the surface. Working on cruise ships is an amazing experience. I'm glad I did it. But yes, it was very, very hard.
So how many contracts have you fulfilled on a cruise ship before?
I lost track of how many contracts I did, but I spent 4 years on cruise ships. I did about 6 different cruise lines. I made sure I finished my first full contract with Carnival. That became a point of pride. And to be fair, I would have quit too. But I was there chasing a woman, and it was the only way I could be with her, was to survive. And after a while, a lot of people tried to push me out simply because I was American. They didn't want an American presence on board, taking the jobs away from foreigners. So there was a lot of political stuff going on. And I felt like I had something to prove. I'm like, everyone's like, hey, Americans are wimpy. We can't handle anything. We can't work hard. I got really tired hearing that. So I made sure I survived my first contract entirely on Carnival. And then I switched to a different department, and it was a whole different story.
So you say you were chasing a girl. Was she a passenger? Was she another crew member? Or how did that go out exactly?
Yeah, she was a waitress on Carnival Cruise Lines, and in the book I call her Bianca. She was from Romania, and I met her when she was on vacation. I used to have a business, and one of my employees was from Romania and a childhood friend of hers. So she came to visit her friend, kind of hooked us up in a manner of speaking. Like, I need somebody who's harmless and fun to show her a good time tonight while we're all doing this big date thing. Can you do it? So I said, sure. And we hit it off really well. I met her like 3 days in a row, and I said, I got to follow this lady back to Romania. So I did for about 3 weeks. And then we spent a week in Egypt as well, fell in love, and she had to go back to ships. So at that point in my life, I was free and clear, and I said, I'm going to join you on ships. So that's what I did.
Last week on our show, we actually had another author, Catherine Chapman, who wrote about her adventures on a cruise ship. She was talking about how very risque and sexually active some of the cruise ship is below deck. Can you attest to that, or what is it actually like?
Oh, yeah. You know, anybody who's ever been to college will know how wild it can be the first couple of years. They've got nothing on cruise ships. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is because you've got people from all over the planet Earth who are experiencing first world freedoms for the first time. And, you know, a lot of these people live with mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and cousins. And, you know, they don't have the freedom that we have to explore what they want to explore. And so you're meeting people from all over the world. It's almost a crime to hook up with somebody who's of your same race, your same color, your same religion. It's this international smorgasbord, and people are really stretching their legs. Let's just put it that way.
So you say that she's from Romania originally, and in the intro, I was talking about you spending a night in Dracula's castle. Was that in that type of experience there? Did she live there, or what's going on with
Yeah,
Romania?
she lived in a town called Sigishwara, which is the hometown of Vlad the Impaler, which is, of course, the real Dracula that Bram Stoker based the vampire off of. So there is an official Dracula's castle in Transylvania, which wasn't that far from where we lived. And my first Halloween, I had to go hang out there. Now, they didn't let me in on Halloween night, but I was there during the day doing the tours. But nobody celebrates Halloween in Romania, so they had no idea why I was geeking out. And when you talk about Dracula in Romania, okay, the young people know about the vampire, but certainly all the older or middle-aged or older people, they just think about their historical figure. And
Hmm.
they're like, why are you going crazy over George Washington or something like that? That's the way they look at it. And I'm like, no, 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 it's so much more. It's cool. It's the fangs, the blood, the cape. Come on. They have no idea what you're talking about.
So
That's
it
all right.
sounds like you've been to a lot of different countries. Can you actually name some of the countries you've been to on your travel?
Yeah, I've been to over 60 nations now. Most of Europe, though I still haven't been to some of them in the middle, which drives me nuts. I haven't been to Switzerland and Austria yet, but all over the Caribbean, courtesy of cruise ships.
Hmm.
Um, you name it. I'm kind of an adventurer at heart, so I hop to Africa as much as possible. For my 40th birthday, I felt the need to climb Mount Kilimanjaro to prove I was still young. You know, so I spent a couple of weeks in East Africa. Just recently, I went to the South Pacific. I'm a big fan of the South Pacific. So Fiji, New Zealand, the Cook Islands, things like that. I always gravitate to those. But there's something to find anywhere you go. I mean, the world is a big, glorious place, and you know, you got to hit those far corners. What can I say?
Hmm. We actually have a question that's come up a lot quicker. I like the way that Patty Martin thinks. She asks, "What country has the best food?" I'm gonna add on to that and say, which one has the worst food as well?
The best food, I would just have to lump most of the Mediterranean coast into that. You know, France, the food was incredible, and I'm not a big fan of French cuisine. I don't like heavy cream sauces, but you know, pasteurizing your cheese just kills it. They've got like 800 kinds of cheese. Try them all. They're amazing, and you can't get them here in the States. And the flavors just explode. So one of the best dishes I've ever had in my life was in France, and it was just a radish and some butter and salt. But each one of these ingredients was carefully selected by a local chef, and it was a sublime experience. So I would just have to say, I like natural food stuff that feels like where it was grown from. And for that matter, in Romania, I lived there on my vacations with my girlfriend at the time, and they still grow food using, cow manure as fertilizer. Believe me, that's better than chemicals. It tastes better somehow. It's better. But the worst food I ever had, believe it or not, was in New Zealand, which was just recently. I'm freaked out by British food. I got to be honest. The heavy meat pies, it's an island, and every time I ordered fish, they had to beer batter it and deep fry it till it was dead. And, they keep all their food in the coffee shops under these heat lamps, kind of like a 7-Eleven. I didn't go to New Zealand to have 7-Eleven food. That's exactly what it reminded me of. It freaked me out.
7-Eleven food. I've actually been to New Zealand myself. It was the first time I was kind of experienced with Vegemite and a lot of different Australian cuisines there. Vegemite, that's a whole nother story of me kind of playing around with my friends, convincing them it tasted like Nutella for the first time. But I'm not going to bore you with all the details. Yeah, it's a very salty paste that's, I don't know why it's made. Anyway, so what's the hospitality like for a lot of these different countries? Is it different than the US or?
Uh, I don't want to say it's different. Hospitality is something you're going to find everywhere in the world. The only difference would be how open people are in other parts of the world to inviting you into their home. That's something Americans don't really do. We're a little bit standoffish in that regard. We're friendlier than almost anybody, but that doesn't mean we're going to invite a stranger into our home. And overseas, you'll get that a lot. And, the best food, speaking of food, is made by grandma back home. Don't go to the restaurant, have grandma make it. And so that kind of openness, and they try to include you into their family a lot more elsewhere in the world. And I found that just about everywhere I've ever gone, actually. The possible exception, say, Russia. That pops into my head for some reason. They were kind of cold. But otherwise, everybody's very, very warm and inviting.
When we were in the Caribbean, one of the other people that were with us, Spencer, was telling us, I would go in the taxi cab, we would all give him $20. They would drive us around, give us a personal tour, and invite us into their house, and he was just completely been baffled by it. He just did not expect that, the generosity that some of these people were being able to show them, especially just inviting complete strangers into their house with their children. It's definitely weird and foreign to a lot of Americans, almost taboo, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how, those are the experiences that you take home with you too. I've met a million cruisers, or conversed with a million cruisers anyway, who had a very similar story to that. And when they talk about their cruise experience, the first thing they talk about is the taxi driver who gave them a full day tour and brought them to the house and had that personal connection. But that's where real memories are made. That's where real happiness and joy comes from, is personal connections, people. Which is amazing to hear me say that, because I'm a misanthrope, but really, it is about people.
Out of all of the different places that you've been to before, which one would you want to revisit in the future, and why?
That's a really tough question. I'm a big jungle nut, so any place that has really dense rainforest, I will always go back. So Costa Rica is very high on the list. It doesn't sound very exotic to sit around and watch for birds, but man, you can have a great time doing that in Costa Rica. But my favorite country, really above all the rest, is Greece. There was something magical about it. Just the mix of the weather, the landscape, the history, the food, it just was amazing. You could be out all day in the sun and you wouldn't get sunburned. I don't know how that's even humanly possible, but it was. And, the history, I'm a history nut. Tour the ruins, get out of Athens, don't do those tours. Go find some of the old ruins from 3,000 years ago, and go to Mycenae, stuff like that. It's amazing. Something magical about it.
So I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit. This comes from Razor Ray on Periscope. Which ship has the best food? We've talked about all different countries. Now, what ship? Because you
Ah,
said you've been on six different ones, right? Or
yeah,
six different
well,
lines.
I spent one glorious contract on the Radisson line, which is no longer the Radisson line, but they had actual food from Le Cordon Bleu. So of course the food was fantastic.
It's
The
pretty
downside
impressive.
to that is that as a honorary officer, which I was at the time as an art auctioneer, I was required to host a table every night, and I was required to eat in the dining room formally every night. So I gained a lot of weight. It was bad.
I do not blame you. I used to be really into culinary. I think I'd either Johnson Wales or like Cordon Bleu. So I'd go to a lot of the different hostings that they would have. Food, absolutely amazing, both of them. Um, Going back to cruise ship question, this one comes from Andy Tavares. He asks, "Are the crew paid appropriately for their country?"
Yes, absolutely. The cruise lines want to avoid press about what it's like working on a cruise ship because they know that most of the viewers are from North America and they're viewing it from a North American eyes. And you really can't do that. I mean, an extra $5 tip in the Philippines is huge. So, yeah, there's a reason why there's all these second and third world nation employees, and they are living large back home. So it's really hard work, but they're rewarded very, very well for it. So just make sure you do the auto tips, give them a couple extra bucks. That's great. Don't give them stuff because they don't have any ability to take it home.
Hmm.
Just give them a couple of bucks, and maybe their younger siblings can go to school, right? Stuff like that. It makes a huge difference. So yeah, they're taken care of. The cruise lines do take care of their employees very well. Like I said, just not if you're an American.
Hmm.
Yes, it sounds terrible to say that, but
Hopefully, people know what you mean. I kind of get it after talking with so many different people from different ethnicities and different nationalities going on cruise ships. A lot of them come from lower third world countries where the wage that they're getting on the cruise ship is quite a small fortune to them compared to an American going on. We're so privileged in being able to have a lot more affordable jobs here, where it's just doesn't really hail in comparison from the differences of growing up there.
yeah.
We got Ward Bodner asking, "Have you been on any good transatlantic cruises?"
Oh, I have been on what I consider to be the ultimate transatlantic cruise. I was on the Windstar line for about a year, and the Windsurf is the largest sailing vessel in the world, tied with its sister ship, the Club Med 2. But we actually sailed, and I mean that in the traditional sense, with 7 sails across the Atlantic. So it took 2 weeks, but we avoided all the usual trade routes, and it was sublime. There's this thing that happens to you when you become one with the sea and one with the wind and the nature, and it's so laid back, it's so chill. When those propellers don't turn on for 14 days in a row, it's a whole new world. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. It's expensive, unfortunately, because there's not many of them, but man, it was amazing.
The one thing I really want to do is go on an Alaskan cruise line and see the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Lights. I've heard that it's just absolutely spectacular. Have you ever come in contact with them before?
No, one of my greatest regrets is that I have not been on an Alaska cruise line. And in fact, I was on one ship that was about to do, um, it was about to do like Greenland and Iceland and all these northern ports. And as usually happens in my line of work at the time, which was an art auctioneer, they'll tell you 2 days in advance, oh, we're going to fly you to Botswana,
Hmm.
wherever. And sure enough, I didn't get to do that cruise either. So I've never seen the Aurora Borealis. And I want to take an Alaska cruise, but my wife worked it for like 2 years and she's so
Hmm.
done with it. She's like, no, honey, I don't ever want to do that again. I've seen it a million times. I'm like, I can't go with that, I get in trouble. But maybe I'll have to one of these days. I don't know.
Little side adventure for you to go on.
Yeah.
Moss Tiffany asks a really good question. I started traveling internationally back in 2000. with everything that's happened with politics, have you noticed a change in attitude towards American over the years?
Mm, yes. Well, I haven't noticed so much an attitude towards Americans as I've noticed a change because of Americans, if that makes sense. I was in Africa, for example, when they closed down all the embassies that were uh, in these various, like 30 different Arabic nations. And I was flying Qatar Airlines, and turns out that Qatar was the culprit of something.
Hmm.
And things got rerouted, and there was a lot of tension in the air, and whatever. I'm just saying that whatever America does, the world feels.
Hmm.
And most of the people that I've met, if not every last one of them, really, they recognize the difference between American people and American politics. So that's a great thing. But yeah, I don't think people have changed their view of Americans. Just, the Iraq War was not popular globally. I don't think that's any secret. I did happen to be abroad during the election this year. I got a lot of questions about that. But again, everybody differentiates between the people and the politics. So they like to ask about it. They want to see what an American has to say, especially if they see that you're not a cowboy type, bringing a chip on your shoulder, which I hope I'm not. So maybe I like talking politics. Maybe I bring that out in people I don't know. But it is an interesting subject, so I do like talking about it. So I'm very aware of it.
Okay, I have a brilliant segue that I just set up, so let me take a sip of beer and then just blow your mind with this.
I'll join you.
Okay, so your whole entire life sounds like an action thriller book, just filled with like romance, just everything. And speaking of books, you're an author yourself. What type of books have you written? Can you go into detail about how similar they are? Are they works of fiction? I'm not very familiar with your work, so I'd love to hear all about it.
Yeah, well, my first professionally published book was Cruise Confidential, which was all about working on Carnival Cruise Lines, and it's an expose, but also a love story. I mean, I went through a lot of crap, but it was a very positive outcome. I ended up writing 5 books about working on cruise ships. 4 of them in particular are in the Cruise Confidential series, hopping around different ships, hopping around different jobs. I mean, I was an art auctioneer, talk about that. I talk about a lot of the international politics of working on a cruise ship, particularly in the 4th book. Mm-hmm. So that's what launched my writing career. And after that, I started switching slowly to more blogs about travel. But it's pretty hard to compete with all the bloggers out there. There's dozens of people who just choose to be unemployed for 5 years and blog about it. So it's really hard to get books published nowadays about traveling. So lately I've been switching to another favorite of mine, which is fiction. I really love horror stuff. That's why I was so geeking out in Romania when I lived in Transatlantic. So I'm unrolling this year, actually, a whole bunch of fiction stuff and a fiction entertainment website that's about monsters and fun stuff like that. So I'm trying to lighten up, in other words.
I have a slew of book questions that I've been saving the best for last. So we have one from Linda Moore Harry. She asks, Brian, I have read your book and thoroughly enjoyed it. My question is, do you think the working conditions have improved for the employees since you've worked on the ships?
That is a great question. And the answer is no. No, they have not. They have done a great job of making it look like they've gotten better. When I was working, like I was on the Carnival Legend, for example, I was working 100 hours a week. I did that for like 15 weeks and then I stopped counting. However, most of those hours were off the clock. That was just extra work that they gave me for reasons I get into in the book, and it's not a big deal. But the point is, working conditions are still really hard on cruise ships. You work long, long hours. It's a tough, tough job, and you don't get paid a lot of money. That having been said, it's an amazing experience. I don't recommend it for everybody, but I don't diss it at all. I knew what I was getting into, and it absolutely improves the lives of everybody who do it. And they line up to get these jobs. They lie, cheat, and steal to get these jobs. They do that for a reason. So, I'm not here to poo-poo on cruise ships at all. But if they try to tell you that everything's great and hunky-dory and those were issues of the past, that is not quite true.
So a lot of some of the authors that I've talked to in the past, they refrain from mentioning what cruise line they were on, or some of the people, or they changed the stories enough. You've mentioned some of the cruise lines in your book and before. So are you still welcome on some of the cruise ships?
Yeah, it's not a big deal. When Cruise Confidential came out, Carnival was fielding a lot of questions from people because I was predominantly talking about Carnival. And they just ignored me, which was the right thing to do, I think, on their behalf. Plausible deniability. But they don't care. I mean, they're a huge, huge corporation, tens of thousands of employees, billions of dollars. They know what they're doing. And if you've actually read my book, you find out that I'm very positive about Carnival Corporation. So it's just people that were trying to rake up some mud, that were wondering if I'm not welcome. And it's not a big deal, not at all. I mean, I name all my cruise lines because I wanted to name the ships that I was on. I wanted people to know this is nonfiction, and you can follow where I am. I got photos that are tagged and things like that. But of course, I changed people's names. That seemed like a no-brainer.
Well, that's good that you're still welcome back in some of the ships. So maybe you could book something for one of the Alaska cruises in the future then.
Yeah.
We have another question from Ken Jordan. He asks, Brian, out of all the books you have written, what was the hardest one to write and why?
The hardest book that I ever wrote was Unsinkable Mr. Brown, which is the third book in my Cruise Confidential series. And that's because that's the one that gets personal. The first two books in the series were pretty straightforward. This is what it's like working on cruise ships. These are the crazy things that people do below decks and the crazy things that happen. And the third one was kind of an extension of that, but I wanted to explain to people why I got there in the first place. And it was about my love affair with Bianca. And it was about the goods and the bads, the highs and the lows. And it was the most amazing experience of my life. It was truly a Hollywood romance, but it also had warts and all. And so revealing yourself and a love affair is, one part liberating and three parts terrifying. And, Bianca, I'm glad I never put her real name in. She may have even, not been happy for some of the things I wrote. We still talk, actually, all the time, but we never talk about that book, interestingly enough. So that was a really hard one to write. And I also wrote it when I was married to a different woman, another Romanian, I might add. So it was a little weird writing about and trying to recapture this amazing Hollywood romance that took me to 3 different continents within a month. I mean, that's some pretty heady stuff. And I'm like, oh, I have to close my diary and, hi, honey. I wasn't doing anything.
Did that cause any issues at all with your current relationship, writing about a former love affair?
No, not at all. I met my wife on cruise ships. And, look, everybody that works cruise ships knows that that's the kind of stuff that goes on. And most people have ship squeezes. I mean, I would say the majority of people I met have a different relationship or multiple every contract, even if they have somebody back home waiting. It's a very hard life. You're very lonely. The crew is turning on a weekly basis. So you don't have friends that last very long. And so it's easier to get a quick physical salve than it is to get a real deep relationship, So you go for the Band-Aid because you can't cure the problem until you go home at the end of your contract.
So going back to your job on the cruise ship, you said you were starting off as a waiter. Have you ever tried to climb the corporate ladder to kind of get a little bit more further progression on a cruise ship, or were you satisfied with a waiter?
That's a great question. I actually was hired not as a waiter, but as low-level restaurant management. And it was the international politics that made me a waiter. I was not allowed to become an officer because the guy in charge didn't want to give a stripe to an American who would just quit. And I
Hmm.
can't blame him for that attitude, but he demoted me back to waiter, and I realized it was a dead end, and I was going to get crushed by this international political machine, and I was getting crushed. It was terrible. So I moved away from the restaurants. I would have enjoyed staying in the restaurants if I could have, but I didn't want to try to surmount that wall. It wasn't worth it. The risk reward wasn't worth it. So I switched to becoming an art auctioneer. I entertained becoming a cruise director, and I was following that path simultaneously. And the art auctioneer thing popped up first. Didn't hurt that I happened to have a degree in art history, which I never thought would count for anything. So that's probably what landed me that role.
Nice. That's yeah, I don't know how I would feel about kind of working on something, getting promoted, demoted, and then working a dead end job. That would almost kind of crush my enthusiasm for what I'm trying to do there. It sounds like you've had quite the struggle on some of the cruise ships, but you've definitely had some amazing experiences as well. So I don't know, it's kind of like a coin flip type of situation almost. We have
You
a
know,
couple more questions coming in.
okay.
This one comes from Amanda Gary. The last question also is from Patty Barn. Forgot the name there. This one comes from Amanda. She asks, "How many lines have you worked for?"
I've worked on 6 cruise lines. Can I remember them all? Most of the big ones, pretty much everybody except for Celebrity Princess and Disney.
Mm,
And a few small ones, like the Windstar line, only had 3 ships at the time. So that was a really dinky one. But most of my time was on Carnival. I was on like 5 different Carnival ships. Carnival was probably my favorite. It's just, I can't say they're better people, but they're good people.
mhm,
And Carnival does probably more for their employees than any other cruise line, teaching people secondary languages, how to write better, trying to improve their lives, stuff like that. So the little bells and whistles from Carnival are better, I think, for
mhm.
the average crew member.
Nice. Well, it definitely sounds a little bit more pleasant now.
Oh yeah,
Um,
believe me, it is an amazing experience, and it's so easy to get caught up on listing the trials and tribulations. But
mhm,
working on a cruise ship is so much greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, it's a life-changing event. You learn about the world, you learn about yourself, and what can I say? It's awesome. Talk to your waiters, talk to your service staff, your room stewards. These people are amazing, and it's awesome. I mean, there's a reason I married somebody from the ships. No
mhm.
one who hasn't worked it, they can't understand. It's almost like being in the military, just nobody's trying to kill you. You know.
It kind of depends, I guess, on how badly you mess up on the job. But
Right. Well, I
um,
messed up pretty badly.
final question: what's some advice for traveling to foreign places for the first time?
you know, expectations can be shackles. So leave them at home. You're going somewhere new and exciting. So open yourself up to the experience and don't worry about the little things like I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm hungry. We place a real premium in our culture here on comfort. And, I'm the same as everybody else. But if that's all you focus on, you're going to ignore all the new stuff that's right there to be seen. So get a little dirty, open your eyes up, and if you really want to take some of that experience home, learn something new because that's with you all the time. The crap you buy or even the photos that you take, you're not going to be looking at all the time. But if you
Mhm.
learn something, that's with you forever.
Good advice. Well, Brian, we really appreciate you coming on. You've definitely kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different things. Thank you for being so honest and having a great vicarious type of attitude towards this. It's definitely a
My
pleasure to
pleasure.
have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So we will keep in touch with you. Stick around, and then we'll bring you back on after we go off the show.
Sounds good.
Okay, guys. So this week for the Show Us Your Face segment, if you guys want to be featured on the Show Us Your Face segment, you can send your photo of you on a cruise ship. Let us know where the photo was taken and who you are or who you're with. You can send it to photos@cruiseweek.tv. So this week's segment comes from Julia Long, pictured here with her husband Ernest on the Anthem of the Seas. Don't they just look so happy together? That looks like a very comfortable and serene type of area. So again, guys, if you want to be featured for the Pick of the Week segment or the Show Us Your Face, send your pictures to photos@cruiseweek.tv and we'll try to have you on for one of our segments. Okay, guys, I am pretty much out of my beer gauntlet. Okay, guys, I'm out of my beer gauntlet. So I'm going to be wrapping this up. If you guys really like us a lot, you can go to our support page at cruiseweek.tv/support, and we will mention you in our inner circle area. We'll bring you to our special secret zone. If you guys want to find out what's in the inner circle, leave us a like or a small donation there, and we'll bring you in, and you guys get some exclusive features a little bit before everyone else. So, guys, I really hope you enjoy the show. Give us a like, give us a share, tell us all your friends, tell us all about it. If you did miss our show or you know someone who did miss the show, you can watch us again back on Facebook or you can go to cruiseweek.tv and it'll be on one of the episodes. And, guys, like always, we'll see you on the ships.